Hey everyone, it's Strange Michael. I hope you're doing well today. I've been talking so much today, I have kind of a strained throat all of a sudden. Anyway, today I'm going to be doing the third film in the franchise I'm currently reviewing, which is Nightmare on Elm Street, in this wonderful, beautiful, gorgeous red and black box set. This Part 3 is one of the best Part 3s ever made, in any franchise ever. I don't care if we're talking about Halloween, or if we're talking about Friday the 13th, or Scream, anything like that. Anyway, we're talking about Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors, which is the shit. It is so good. I love this movie. It's probably my favorite of the franchise. I haven't entirely decided on that because I'm rewatching these movies again for like the first time in like 2 or 3 years. It's been a while just because I got so busy when I got married. My wife doesn't like horror, so I don't really watch much of it with her, which I've talked about that a lot on the channel. I don't need to get into all that. Anyway, this movie is directed by Chuck Russell, who is a classic director. I mean, he's fantastic. He did The Mask. He did the Jim Carrey The Mask, not the other one. He did, what else did he do? The Blob. He did The Blob. The Blob is the bomb, too. If you haven't seen that, holy shit. Writers. Wes Craven worked on the story for this. Bruce Wagner, Frank Darabont, my boy. I love Frank Darabont. He's the shit, too. Chuck Russell also worked on it as well. With that kind of team behind this, and New Line Cinema even bringing in Wes Craven to write the story, or at least a particular story to adapt the screenplay from, just to have that there, ain't that surprising to you? Doesn't that surprise you, like, that they would even do that to kind of make up for things with how Part 2 kind of went? You got to give it to New Line Cinema. They brought back Robert Englund when they fired him on Part 2. They met his demands and everything else. That was great because the replacement was awful in, like, the shower scene and stuff. He was great. He was so great, they should have never let him go. Should have met him halfway immediately, as soon as he made demands. But Wes Craven, they met again with this. I love that he was involved with this. But again, Chuck Russell directed this one, not Wes Craven. And I think it really shows. This film has such a big feel to it. It feels like a bigger movie than what it actually is. You know, it's surprising to me. If you don't know the story of Part 3, if you haven't seen this one, please watch it first. You need to go into this movie not knowing anything about it. There's some spoilers for kind of Part 1, sort of, kind of. This kind of ignores Part 2, and I want you to see it, because Part 3 is the shit. It is fantastic. And again, rewatching it this time around, this might very well be my favorite of the entire franchise. I don't know for sure, but it's up there, man. If you love Part 1, you'll probably love this as well. I love most of these movies, and I like all of them at least. Even the worst of them, as I've said over and over again. But this is such a surprise every time I watch it, dude. It really is. Every time I watch this, there's more and more that I notice, just like I do with all the other films in the franchise, but this one just gets better and better. Between the music, how we start off at the beginning of this movie with this kind of typical Nightmare on Elm Street type of theme, synthwave type of thing, and then we jump right back into like an 80s movie, like the Rock soundtrack. And by the way, this came out in 1987, 2 years after Part 2. And this one was the bomb. I think this is the last one my uncle saw. He was a big Freddy Krueger fan, but he died in 1987. He was murdered. I think this is the last one that he saw. And to go out knowing that this is the last Freddy movie you ever saw, man, what a way to be a Freddy fan. Not that he should have died at 87, but still. It's wild to me. It's super wild to me. But this movie's so good. If you don't happen to know the story about it, basically this time around we're following a bunch of kids that are in kind of a troubled teens asylum type of thing. It's a mental asylum type of thing. And they're all happening to have dreams about this guy with knives for fingers that is killing each of them. And they've had a couple of suicides in this asylum and nobody knows how. And of course, there is a new woman who's kind of a psychiatrist type that comes in, who is played by Heather Langenkamp. Her name as a character happens to be Nancy. She is Nancy from the first film, which is hard to imagine with the end of that first movie. I don't want to tell it to you, but it just kind of, it's a little hard to imagine, hard to believe that it went that way. She shouldn't be alive. She should be dead. But oh well, I'll take her. She's much better in this than she was in Part 1. She's actually trying to put together a good performance, and I think about 95% of the time she does a decent job. She does even better in New Nightmare. Really, honestly, I mean that, later on down the road. She's fine here. She does a good job. She's kind of the character, the adult character that relates with these kids, even though she's not much older than most of these kids in this film in real life. But she comes in, and the people who are kind of the leaders and doctors in this place don't believe the kids at all. They just think they're all nuts and troubled and whatever. The cast of teens. I really love all of them. I think they're all good. Every single one of them are really good here and really bring something special here. And to watch the Never Sleep Alone documentary and hear about all this trouble behind the scenes amongst the cast and the directing and all that, that surprises me with how much tension was apparently on the set, with how good this movie was, how great it turned out. It really shocks me because it's such a wonderful movie. Everything from the music, again, the practical effects, man. They're the bomb. Even when the practical effects are there, if we're doing CGI or whatever, some kind of special effect with computerized stuff, it looks great. It really does, and it holds up well, too. Just everything about it, the location of the asylum, the creativity behind the kills, they're wonderful. And as I said with Part 2, this film kind of backs away from the gore that's in Part 1. Part 2 and Part 3 have little moments here and there that are pretty horrific gore-wise, but nothing literally like blood gushing out of a bed onto the ceiling and all over the walls. There's nothing like that in this movie, but there's some other really horrific stuff that I've never seen done before or after this movie. It's wonderful. I love it. And again, I love all the kid characters. They're great. Kincaid is one of the best Nightmare on Elm Street characters, and I will argue that until the day I die. And the fact that you could take something like Nancy and make her a better character with the directing and performance and all that. Chuck Russell's a way better director than Wes Craven. I will argue that till the day I die. It doesn't even feel like it's trying to be like a Wes Craven movie the way Part 2 tried to be like that and try to feel like that in tone. And I appreciate that in one aspect, that the second film director tried to do that, to just make a series feel like a series, like you would a TV show. You want the directors to have just in common the typical style and formula of the way they shoot certain things. Going outside of that box can do a lot for a franchise, and this is a great example of that. It really blossomed out, and it really did something special. And it's praised to this day in 2022 because of that. It's weird with the Nightmare on Elm Street films, too. I never really have a time of the year that I can watch this movie series. It's not like I saved this for Halloween time. I might watch some of them here and there, maybe. But like Halloween films, I watch during the Halloween time, October. Friday the 13th is typically summer. Sleepaway Camp is summertime. Jaws is a summertime movie for me. Haven't really watched many of the sequels to that, but still. You know what I mean? There's not many that I watch. There's not really a place in the world to watch on the timeline of the year for the Nightmare on Elm Street films. They're kind of just whenever you feel like it. And I love that about them. They're very versatile in that way if they don't even mean to be. But again, the creativity behind the nightmares and stuff are wonderful here. I really love it. One of the interesting aspects is that we have a character in here played by Patricia Arquette, who I can't stand. She thinks she's better than these movies, and just in general, she's not that great of an actress. She's not really that great here. She has this talent, kind of like Nancy had, where she can bring people into her dream, which was never established in Nightmare on Elm Street that Nancy was special because of being able to have that ability. But in this movie and in Part 4, they established like she's special because she can do that. Why Nancy was special as well for that. This is such a great flick. All the little changes on the lore, not even changes, but just the expansions on those are great. It tries most of the time to keep Freddy in the dark, but it's not afraid to get horrific with him. It's not afraid to have him shapeshift or do new creative kills and whatnot. The puppet kill is like one of the best things I've ever seen in movies, ever. I love it. It's fantastic, it's horrific, and it's just unbelievable. There's a couple of special effects in here that aren't most of them I would say are 95% of the time amazing, and they still hold up. There's like one that I can think off the top of my head that doesn't look good because of the weird blue screen effect that happened. But man, I love it. I think it's so good. It works so well in every single way that a movie should. And this is a true classic. I think this whole series are a bunch of classics for the most part, but man, this is iconic for a reason. I have a NECA Freddy Krueger figure that comes with a little puppet and everything too. I love it. I hold on to that dearly because I love it so much. I was so glad when I started seeing those pop up in like Target and Walmarts and stuff because of how much I love Freddy Krueger and love this particular movie. And I'll say it again, every time I watch this movie it gets better and better and better. And I think that this film particularly really establishes what the rest of the series becomes. Part 2 kind of kicks that off a little bit, but this film really kind of goes there with the type of humor from people like Kincaid, to just everything else that comes down the pipeline after that, with the type of humor and the way Freddy is treated as a comedian, but also as a horror villain and an icon. It just gets better and better. To me, this really steered where we needed to go, and it really pushed us that way, and I think it works most of the time. Unlike most of the horror fans and most of the Nightmare on Elm Street fans, I think most of the time it works the direction that this film pushes the rest of the series towards. Because from here on out, everything but New Nightmare wants to be this movie. that's just the case, frankly. You know? And so much so that 4, 5, and 6 try their best, and they feel like the same movie. All of those 4, 5, and 6, and again, I've said this over and over again, in my brain, they become one movie when I think back to what kill was in what movie, or what character was in what movie at that point. But Dream Warriors, man, what do you think of this iconic, classic movie in the franchise? Do you think it's the best? Do you think it's the worst? Is it just the middle of the road? What would you rank this movie, dude? Just before we get to the ranking video of the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise eventually down the road for my channel, God willing, what do you think about this? Is this not the best one ever? Is it ever going to be topped? I don't think so. That's just from what I'm seeing so far. Maybe I will top it my ranking with something else I like more. I don't know. But I love this one. I think it's just amazing. Everything from the soundtrack to the practical effects to Freddy Krueger himself. Robert Englund kills it in this once again, if not possibly better than he did in 1 and 2. It's wonderful, frankly. When it comes to Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3, Dream Warriors, did you love this film again? Put it down below. If you hate it, put it down below. If I had to rate it on a 5-star basis, this one has aged better than any of the other movies, I think, even though it's a very 1980s movie with the soundtrack and whatnot. I think it's almost perfect, frankly. Very few flaws in here, something I would not count against it, with like special effects changing up too much and whatnot over the years. I'm hands down going to give this a 5 out of 5 stars. It's amazing. It's so good. It's so classic. I cannot believe I never saw this growing up until I was like 16, 17, somewhere in there. It kind of makes me sad, frankly. I wish I had seen this more when I was growing up compared to the Halloween sequels that aren't the best. You know, like 4 and 5. 4 is okay, but 5 is really fucking bad. Anyway, I wish I had seen this more. I feel like I saw Part 2 more when I was growing up than this movie, which is also a shame, because I like Part 2 a lot. I think it's really good, but it's not as good as this one. Not even close. You know? Anyway, what are your thoughts once again? Thank you for watching. Happy Easter weekend. God bless you guys, and goodbye.